The amazing race to be the greatest of all time. And we're not talking about basketball. Whew. Cole Sports presents On the Daily. Well, welcome to a Friday edition, or as my man Snowman in the morning does, Friday edition of On the Daily. Cole Johnson here on the mic. I had to tip my cap to you, Brian. And this is Friday. And normally Friday, we just simply lay out. And I wanted to talk about a happy topic because I'm a tennis fan. And the French Open just got finished up this past week. And we saw history made with Rafael Nadal picking up his 20th Grand Slam. His amazing run at the French Open continues, picking up his 13th. But we'll talk more about that later. And it's not just him. It's also Roger Federer and the guy he beat at the French Open final, Novak Djokovic. And the subject matter is so great to me, I had to put this in a email tennis fan. Subject of email, greatness on display. Body of email. When you look at the landscape of tennis all the way around, you look at how things are and you tend to say, okay, well, we focus on the women's side of things. Normally it's Serena Williams, maybe with this side of, well, it used to be a side of Caroline Wozniacki, and maybe a little side of Naomi Osaka, maybe even a little side of Sloane Stevens, I mean. But it's basically Serena or bust on the women's side, really. On the men's side, it's a bit different. Because not only do you have one or two, you have three guys who can compete for the greatest tennis player of all time on the men's side. Because to me, the women's game and the men's game are two totally separate games. They're played two different ways. And you really can't quantify that there is one who is greater than the other, regardless of gender. Now, you can talk about who has the most focus and who gets the most attention. Serena wins that hands down. But in terms of play, on the men's side of things, it used to be Rod Laver. And then you got on into the 70s and you saw Mitty Rebels. And emerging from that was Bjorn Borg, who was stoic, a brash Jimmy Connors, and even brasher and bratty John McEnroe. Then in the 80s, you had an explosion from Europe. Ivan Lendl, Mats Wilander, Stefan Edberg, and then, of course, the Wunderkind from Germany, Boris Becker, who took Wimbledon by storm in 85 and 86, winning back-to-back Grand Slams there. And then you had the 90s, which was ruled by two Americans, Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi. And by the time we got to the 2000s, we pretty much wrapped it up. The two greatest players we saw, we just got a chance to see complete their rivalry, which would be Pete Sampras, a little bit over Andre Agassi, and we pretty much closed the book to that chapter, and that was it. And then Roger Federer came aboard and ruled in the mid-2000s. And he looked like he was going to smash the record books. Then a funny thing happened along the way to a French Open final. He met up against this guy from Spain named Rafael Nadal, and Nadal beat him in straight sets. We'll talk about that fella from Spain a little later. But Federer's dominance was challenged and then, to be completely blunt, usurped by Nadal in the late 2000s. And then you saw them jostle for the next few years. When this third guy from Croatia came from out of nowhere, almost, Novak Djokovic, and he had this game that sort of harkened you back to you thinking about Ivan Lendl, this guy who just, with his sheer brute force, whether it was the serve, the forehand, the backhand, he would beat you down with his play. Just beat you down, beat you down, beat you down, beat you down, and had the skill to do it too. But he would want to wear you down and beat you down. And it got to the point where he ruled in the mid 2000 odds. And then we come to 2020, where we look at these three guys: Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal. And you say, wow, these guys would be considered the greatest of all time if they didn't have to think about the other two in any era in tennis. Now that I talked about Djokovic, let me talk about him now. So, like I said, to me, his game harkened me back to Ivan Lendl when he ruled it in the late 80s and early 90s. He just had this indomitable will that he just wanted to wear you down and wear you down and wear you down and wear you down. And just hopefully on your behalf, you would want to tap out, because he just believed that he was the more well-conditioned athlete of the two on the court. And he probably feels the same way even now, even at 33. But 17 Grand Slams later, and that's the proof. And I mean, he got to the most recent Grand Slam. So, Grand Slam final, I mean. So, it looks like his method still is there. Now, he does suffer from, I guess, a complex. He's not quite as embraced or celebrated like the other two that I'll talk about. And I mean, it's noticeable. It's noticeable. It's not that he's the bad guy or a bad guy. He just is not, his game is not as fan friendly as the other two. And he's not considered a fan friendly guy. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but he's just not considered a fan friendly guy. He's not considered charismatic enough. And sometimes his temper gets the better of him. Like we saw in the US Open, didn't get to the second week and he disqualified himself from, out of anger, hitting the ball and striking a ball person, knocking her down to the, well, can't really say turf, but court. But the guy is brilliant. What was he? He's ruled the Australian Open. He's ruled the US Open. And he's had his fair share of successes in all four events. All four Grand Slam tournaments, Wimbledon included. And he's just a remarkable guy. I mean, look, 8 Grand Slams, 1 coming this year in Australia. He's remarkable. He's a remarkable athlete. And I think of the three, he is the athlete of the three. He is the guy that is the Energizer Bunny. He could keep going and going and going. In fact, my favorite match of the Australian Open came with him being in the finals, 2012, I believe, and he played Rafael Nadal, and they went 5 sets, and that match went almost 6 hours, 5 hours, 53 minutes. That's the longest ever tennis match ever recorded. And Djokovic won it. And that was the third of his 8 Grand Slams in Australia. And of the 3, Australian Open is Djokovic's tournament. And in a way, I can see why, because of the 4 tournaments, US Open gets a lot of real heavy press. Wimbledon gets the heaviest press because it's considered the most vaunted tournament in tennis. The French Open gets a lot of attention as well. The Australian Open is played in the summertime down under, But in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the winner. And so it doesn't get as much attention in the Northern Hemisphere as it probably should, which is a shame because it's a great tournament. But Djokovic rules it. And because of the attention that it doesn't really get as much in the Northern Hemisphere, he seems to play his best there. But it's not that he doesn't play his best in other tournaments. I mean, he's won the U.S. Open 3 times, and he's won Wimbledon 4. So he has proven his mettle quite well. And then there's Roger Federer, and he's the finesse guy. I would call him the finesse guy. He's the guy that, or a chameleon. If he wants to play power, he can. If he wants to play serve and volley, that's his strong suit, he can. If you want to just be finesse and just do slices, he could do that too. No matter what, he's like the MacGyver on the court. And he's had great success in all surfaces, save for one, although he does have a Grand Slam in there, then that would be clay. However, you can't argue with his success. He's held the Australian Open Championship 6 times in the air. He's held the U.S. Open Championship 5 times in the air, and he has held the Wimbledon Championship 8. So, of course, of the 3, Wimbledon is Federer's tournament of the 3. And he has ruled that more so than any other. However, Federer has lost 5 setters against both Nadal and Djokovic on center court in Wimbledon in the finals. I'll talk about the one to Nadal later. The one to Djokovic I'll talk about now. So they went to 5 sets, and in the 5th set, they actually did a tiebreak because they instituted a tiebreak because they were the last tournament to actually do so. Because they had tie breaks in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th sets. But if you went to the 5th set, you played until one opponent beat the other by 2 games. And I think when they saw one second round, matchup went 70-68 in the 5th set, Wimbledon officials said, okay, let's do a 5th set tie break. But I think what we're going to do is if it's tied 12-12, we'll do the tie break there. And so this was the first time the finals in Wimbledon had instituted this ruling. So Djokovic and Federer went to a 5th set tie break. He beat Federer 7-3 in that tie break, winning the 5th set 13-12. And what was noticeable is both guys sort of played like the other at times. And it was remarkable to see how one guy could force the other into making many mistakes on the same court in the same match. It was great to watch. Great theater. But as I said earlier, Federer ruled in the 2000s until Nadal came on the scene, and Federer has slipped in and gotten a Grand Slam here and a Grand Slam there ever since 2008. And then there is Nadal, who, like Federer, won 20 Grand Slams. The difference, though, is although Federer has sprinkled his 20 with the 4 Grand Slams, you really can't say that about Nadal. Now, Nadal has won the U.S. Open 4 times. He's won the Australian Open once. He's won Wimbledon once. He has won the French Open, though, a record 13 times. Just imagine this. Back in, what was it, 80, 81, when we saw Bjorn Borg rule that tournament, and I think he won it 5 or 6 times. People thought, well, that you can't get any better than that, right? Nadal has won twice as many of those. That's the scary part. I mean, he is just so scary on clay. And of the three, he has a more of a romancing type of game, but he's the baseline fighter. He's the guy on the baseline. He just will grind you down on the baseline. That's just how he is. And one thing I loved about him and his style is that he would incorporate some serve and volley on clay, and I think I never saw that before him. He's a remarkable player, and I already knew that he was good on clay, but I didn't really take him seriously until the 2007 Wimbledon Open final, where the two went 5 sets, but Federer got the better of him. And I was like, okay, well, normally the rule was before then a clay court specialist cannot fool with grass. They just won't even touch grass. And vice versa, because in Pete Sampras's case, I mean, he has 13 Grand Slams. 0 of them were in the French Open because although he won Wimbledon 7 times, he never even got to a French Open final. So here's this clay court guy in Nadal who has ruled Paris, but he's actually making an effort in winning Grand Slams in Britain. That's the amazing part. He's actually making it a stride to do that. And let me correct myself, actually. Nadal has won Wimbledon twice in his career. 2010 and my favorite match of all time, which was the 2008 Wimbledon final. That one seemed to go back and forth. It was hard to say I wanted to root for or root against somebody. I just was enjoying great athleticism both ways around. And when Nadal clinched it and cinched it, it was gold. It was wonderful. It was wonderful to see that we saw a talent arrive in a big way. And so that's the dilemma that I believe I have, and as many tennis aficionados have. Which one of these three would you consider the greatest player in men's tennis history? Nadal, Federer, or Djokovic? You can't go wrong with any of the three. And if I were to be a betting man, I would say Djokovic will probably be able to snatch the title because he's the youngest of the three. I mean, he's 33. Nadal's 34. Federer's knocking on the door to 40. So it's quite possible that we might see Nadal or Djokovic reach the same amount of Grand Slams that Serena's trying to get to. Imagine it, a man having 20 plus Grand Slams. Now we're at the age where we have seen two guys get to 20. And I think in Djokovic's case, he'll be the third. Whoever is the greatest of the three is fine. It doesn't matter to me. What does matter to me is we get to see these greats continue to do it in the twilight of their careers, and they still are the greatest tennis players today. That just shows you how remarkable, how talented, and how elite those three are. And I love it. Coles Johnson, Cole Sports with the Z.com. Now, if you want this wonderful shirt that I'm wearing right here, the description box below has the deets. And I want to hear what you have to say as to who you think is the greatest men's tennis player of all time. Is it Roger Federer? Is it Novak Djokovic? Is it Roger Federer? Which one of the three? I want to hear what you have to say. Like this video, comment below because I really do want to have your opinion on this. And don't forget, hit that notification bell and subscribe to this channel for any and all premieres that come and emanate from Cole Sports on YouTube. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. I enjoyed your VIP, and I hope your Saturday and Sunday is as good or will be as good as mine will be. For now, I am Cole Johnson, and this has been yet another installment and edition of Cole Sports on the visual and on the daily.